Hey, hello everybody and welcome back to Newegg TV. I'm Steve. Today I'm going to do an overview on this high-powered speaker system. It's a 2.1 channel one to be specific from Corsair. This is the SP2500. And I might have already mentioned that this is a 2.1 channel system for speakers, and that basically means 2.1 channels, well, let's put it this way. You get two main left and right speakers. That's going to provide the mid-range and tweeters for you, or the mids and highs, however you like to think of it, as well as the 0.1, which is the subwoofer. And it's actually quite a substantial subwoofer, as you can tell by the size of this box. Also, they have a small controller, but we'll get into that once I open it up. I want to mention that they're measuring the power here, 232 watts, and they're basing that off the FTC method, which I assume they're talking about the Federal Trade Commission and the fact that it has an RMS reading that basically says this system can handle 232 watts continuously. Let's go ahead and flip it around though, because the amp is actually powering the satellite as well as the subwoofer, and I'm more used to talking about subwoofers when I'm thinking about RMS. Let me flip this around. And if you zoom in right here, I can show you a little bit more about the specifications. First and foremost, the frequency response of this setup is 35 hertz all the way up to 20,000 hertz, plus or minus 3 decibels. 232 watts total power, that is measured by the FTC RMS method. The subwoofer dimensions are 18.1 by 10.2 by 11.7 inches. The satellites themselves, you'll have two of them, 4.25 by 4.7 by 6.25 inches. The subwoofer, going back to that, is an 8-inch. It's a 120 watt subwoofer. It has a durable rubber surround. And the specific IEC 60268-5 24-hour continuous rating test, I believe refers to the International Electrotechnical Commission, and they set up different standards for loudspeakers, so this adheres to that standard. Also, the speakers themselves the speaker itself is actually using a bridged dual 60 watt Class D amplifier with an integrated DSP equaling 120 watts of power measured via FTC RMS method. Also an ultra-efficient internal power supply with 100 volt to 240 volt AC input. The satellite speakers themselves are bi-amplified two-way design with a detachable audio cables, I'll show you those cables in a moment, as well as being a 3-inch 40 watt mid-range driver for the mids and a 1-inch 40 watt ferrofluid-cooled with silk diaphragm tweeters for the highs. Now, those two speakers also adhere to the same loudspeaker tests that they had set originally. The 56 watt per channel measured via the same RMS method, and 40 watts for the mid-range Class D amplifiers with integrated DSP, also a 16 watt tweeter Class D amplifier, also with integrated DSP. Let's go ahead and open up the box and talk a little bit more about this. And here's all the stuff that comes inside the box. I'm going to start with the paperwork here. Corsair just wants to warn you to please stop before you decide to take this back to where you purchased it from and contact them first. They very well might be able to help you solve whatever kind of issues you might be having with this particular speaker system. They also have some safety information they want to make sure that you're aware of, certain things you want to try to avoid, and we have the quick start guide, and it's actually quite large, but there's also multiple languages in this particular guide. I'm just going to flip through a couple pages and show you guys what you can expect to see when you're looking through this particular manual. Some stuff about the controller, some other things here about the different EQ settings, and so on and so forth. So we also have the AC power adapter here. That's actually the power cord, I should say, and that's going to give power to the amplifier that's inside the sub. And we do have a 3.5 millimeter to stereo RCA plug. You're going to use that to probably use it from the back of your computer into the back of this system, although it does have two different aux ports, which I'll show you here in just a moment. You do have two 6-foot cables here used to give the satellite speakers, the tweeter as well as the mids are getting separate inputs from this, just to let you know. Of course, it is double amplified, but I'll show you that in just a moment. They're using ATX 4-pin connectors. That's actually kind of nice because, of course, they're saving you some money using what they have in-house to provide for you a sturdy product and also make it a little bit cheaper on your pocket. And if I spin this around and show you the controller, it's actually pretty tiny. You probably want to get a close look at this one. They have a D-sub connector here that allows you to connect to the back of the amplifier, then the back of the sub itself. 6-foot cable for that, and this controller actually helps you to adjust the EQ as well as the DSP that's inside. I'll show you a little bit about this controller a little later, but I'll just show you the buttons. So we have the power button as well as the control knob here. It's also push to select items. We have the speaker mute button as well as the menu button, and we have the subwoofer button. That's basically going to bring up the subwoofer, and you can use this to turn up or turn down the sub. Let's see, down here we do have the headphone jack, 3.5mm jack. That's going to allow you to get your headphones just immediately right in without having to reach around behind your computer or whatnot. We do have an auxiliary in. This is the second of the two that I mentioned already. There's actually a total of 3 if you want to count the RCA, but 3.5mm ins, there's a total of 2. Then we have a mini USB connector here. That's actually going to be used to update the firmware on this device. Although Corsair says in the manual that you won't actually need to, there's nothing planned yet. It's just something to keep in mind, and you can keep in contact with Corsair in order to find out when and if they were to do something like that. Just a little bit of information about the firmware down here on the back. And also some rubber feet that I just barely felt. You probably can barely see them too. All right, let's move on to the speakers themselves. So we have a couple of the satellite speakers on top of the subwoofer. I just thought I might want to start with the satellites first. And as I mentioned before, they do plug in right here at the back. You probably can't barely see it just yet, but I think Tina's going to zoom in for you and get you a good look at it. And that's perfect, thank you very much. The actual diagram here actually is telling us the tweeter has the top set and the mid-range has the bottom set of the positive and negative terminals. Also, it's telling you this is the right speaker, and also, if you didn't already know, red typically indicates the right speaker, left is usually the white one. And I'll spin that around just to show you the white satellite speaker connector here. Now, as I mentioned already, there's a tweeter here as well as a subwoofer. They're also encased in a cover here that doesn't allow you to touch or damage the cones, which is also very important. They're also keeping it with the blue color scheme from Corsair. But I do want to mention the subwoofer that it's sitting on top of. Let me move these down and we'll take a closer look at that. Here's the sub. And it's currently, it's got a kind of a vinyl laminate on it. It's got a little bit of a texture to it. It's pretty standard for what you would see in your household and your home in general for subs. But I do want to mention, of course, that it is Corsair that's providing this. And a nice badge right here. And if I look over here, you'll notice that there's about maybe like a 2-inch diameter port. And that would mean that this is a ported sub box, which essentially that 8-inch speaker is allowing it to get maybe a little bit of bass, and that bass is now traveling out through this as opposed to a sealed box. There's just some differences in the sound, but bottom line is that this is a ported box, and it will allow you to hear the lower bass waves being close to it, and not having to be that far away either. Some speaker sizes would vary, of course. This is an 8, and so it can be very close to you. I'll mention first that there's actually the power adapter here, allowing you to plug in the power and give it power for the amp. And over here we have the auxiliary, the other one of the two that I mentioned already, 3.5mm aux in. We have the line in that's also stereo RCA, the left and the right. We have the D sub for the remote to plug in, as well as the satellite speakers. We have the right and the left, also denoted by the colors, and also mentioning the tweeter being the top set and the mid-range being the bottom set. And now we're looking at the controller itself, and I want to walk you guys through some of the different settings here. This is a 4.6 centimeter TFT display that Corsair is using on it. Now, I did want to show you that the volume is obviously controlled by this control knob, but it also does just about everything else when you're going through the different settings. So I'm just going to go ahead and back out of this and show you some of the other buttons. That's a subwoofer button where you can raise and lower your bass just on the fly without having to go through the EQs and change anything else. Then we have the menu button, which takes us back to the starting menu. The program here I actually just want to mention really quickly, since we're already looking at it, that you can change the DSP to specific settings. So we have late night, stadium, concert hall, club, theater, karaoke, dynamic pop, wide, and back to none again. And just to give you guys some basic explanations on a couple of those, karaoke, just like you were going to sing karaoke, it actually is going to reduce the vocals in songs, or completely eliminate them in some cases, depending on the song, allowing you to be able to do your singing, or some other setting like late night, for instance. Basically lowers the bass of your output here, so that this way you don't have to worry about waking up your neighbors. So it's for you to play at late at night without disturbing any of your neighbors. Also, other things like stadium concert hall are pretty much standard. Implies different reverb and delay and echo to simulate a huge or large environment. Spin down here to the inputs. You can check between, or you can switch between the three. It's already set to the line in, which is the 3.5 millimeter to RCA, aux1 and aux2. Those are the 3.5 millimeter ports on the back of this controller, as well as the back of the subwoofer itself. And we jump down to the equalizer settings. We have reference, classical, can't really pop, jazz, mod X. Keep going. Action, drama, FPS, and action gaming, as well as specific settings for your headphones. I'm just going to go back to reference there for a moment. Just to mention a couple of them, though, the Mod X is basically set up so that if you're watching Blu-ray movies or DVDs, it's basically using something they call the X curve, which basically optimizes that audio sound for you. Action and drama for your movies that need to have clear dialogue, or for explosions in the drama side, or yeah, explosions in drama would be very dramatic, but that's not actually what I meant to say. The action movies with action explosions. Also, FPS and action gaming is what I was going to mention, where your different settings are important for, or the ideal settings are basically set up for those different types of games. I'll just go down here now to the setup menu and show you a couple other things. Of course, you have several different languages you can choose from. I'm just going to spin through those really quickly so you can see them all. Go back to English. And the backlit, which I've set to 60 seconds, so I can ramble without having to worry about moving it very often. But you could set it to 5, 10, 30, 60, and back to 5 again. Then, of course, the colors, you can change that between day and night. Night obviously has a higher amount of darkness in them. And, of course, now that I've set it to 5 seconds, I'm paying the price. Let me go back down to setup menu. Then night settings, obviously for playing at night, so you have less light in your face when you turn it on as opposed to the day setting. Go back to the main menu here just to do full roundabout, and that pretty much wraps up this controller. Okay guys, we're actually implementing some benchmarking now for our speaker systems at Newegg, and Kyle's done a lot of hard work to essentially establish a new way for this benchmark. So it's going to involve a microphone and some software, specifically Rta. So let me go ahead and show you the graphic and I'll get started explaining it. So here's Rta Software, and essentially what we've done is set up a high-powered microphone, or a very sensitive microphone, and we've run this in real-world setup, which basically means it's just sitting there exactly where you would physically be in order to be able to hear this sound, and the subwoofer being on the floor, the two satellite speakers being on the table, and we played through the pink noise that you would essentially get by using this program. Now there's a specific thing we need to do first to calibrate it, and it basically sends out sounds from the lowest possible frequency all the way up to the highest, just to see how it can calibrate for this particular speaker. And then we hold a second test against that first calibration using the same set of speakers. In this case, it's the Corsair SP2500 2.1 channel speaker set. So I want to mention first that if this was to work perfectly in a perfect world and in a vacuum, which is clearly impossible, we would essentially get a straight line here. It wouldn't have any dips or any peaks. It would be perfectly straight, no valleys, no nothing, right? And right now what we're seeing is between 20 hertz all the way up to 20,000 hertz is the current frequency range. Now don't forget too, this particular speaker set actually only has a frequency range of 36 all the way up to 20,000. So I can start right about here before I can make any determination. So everything before this, there are some dips, but it wasn't intended to use frequencies below the 36, so they're not going to come out perfect. Here's a couple dips, which essentially mean the bass would be a little quieter than you would expect it. Although these dips aren't that big, if I jump over here to the right to the 5,000 range, you see a slightly larger peak, and at the 10,000 hertz range, you're actually seeing a bigger peak. What that means is at higher pitched sounds, specifically at the 10,000 hertz range, you are going to see more noise on that level than you would, or louder on that level than you normally would. Let me accentuate that fact by first telling you that I'm using the reference EQ and the DSP is currently off. If I show you what it looks like with the DSP on the karaoke setting and explain a little bit about this first, you can see this huge valley starts to come up. And what's happened is the test is saying, all right, well, you should be this straight line right here, but it's a lot quieter at this range. Well, the karaoke setting is essentially meant to lower or eliminate any of the vocal range. And this is it eliminating that vocal range. It's actually quieter here. So the test is working and the DSP is working. So that's showing you both and illustrating exactly what we're trying to do here. So bottom line is, let me bring it back around full circle to the original set. And the bottom line is, this is actually a remarkable speaker set. They're working really well. It's very strong. A little bit higher here, and not as much lows, or maybe a little quieter on the lows than you expect, but that is, of course, only on the reference EQ. If we were to change the EQ or change the DSP, you could get a lot more bass out of it. So keep these things in mind when I'm showing you these benchmarks. It's just one more thing we're trying to do to try and help you guys find the best possible speaker set for you. All right, everybody, that just about wraps up this overview of Corsair's SP2500 2.1 channel speaker set. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to click the like button. If you haven't already done so, click subscribe to any of our various YouTube channels, and we'll see you guys soon.